Today is going to be my longest Zone 2 ride yet, and it's not going to be that long. It's going to be maybe 4 hours. And so since I've been talking about training and Zone 2 and all that, I want to just do a ride along video where I talk more about it, tell you kind of how I feel as the ride progresses. I've always on these longer rides not paid attention to my power or heart rate that much. I just kind of set a pace, and you know, sometimes I'll push hard, sometimes I'll take it easy, but I've never tried to stay in Zone 2 for a whole long ride. You'll notice that I'm wearing my bone conducting headphones today, and that's one thing that really makes Zone 2 pleasurable, is to be able to listen to like audiobooks and podcasts and just make the most of your time. And it is, by the way, easier to do Zone 2 rides by yourself, which is why a lot of pro cyclists train by themselves a lot, is so that they can target specific zones, whether it's Zone 2, Zone 4. It's easier to do it by yourself. So what I've noticed is at the beginning of a Zone 2 ride, it feels way easy. In fact, your heart rate's pretty low, because I go by power, but I also wear a heart rate monitor. So my power zone, I keep it in Zone 2, but it's really easy. But as the ride progresses, it gets harder. And so that's what I'm going to talk about on this ride. So I literally just started, and I'll let you know kind of how I feel as the ride goes on. A few things that I'll mention about Zone 2 that I've learned is that Zone 2 is where you train your body to clear lactic acid. And it sounds counterintuitive. You would think those hard efforts like Zone 4, Zone 5, where you're building up lactate, you would think that's where your body trains to clear it, but it's actually the slow twitch muscles that clear lactate, and that's why training in Zone 2 will train your body to clear that out. Also, if you're new to it, one thing that you'll notice is that on downhills, if you really monitor your power, you'll push harder than you normally would, because normally you just kind of coast on a downhill, on a ride where you're not paying attention to power. But on the uphills, you're backing it way off to stay in Zone 2 versus those rides where, again, you're not paying attention to power, you're just riding. So that's why it really helps to do these rides on flatter roads, because if not, you're going to be crawling up hills, especially if it's mountainous. In fact, I think it'd be really hard to do a Zone 2 ride on a mountainous route. You'll notice that I'm able to talk, but I'm having to pause a little bit, and that's a classic sign that you're in Zone 2. Like I mentioned, washboards, it's been so dry here. I mean, the driest I've seen it in a really long time. But there's a lot of health benefits, not just for training, but to help your body overall be healthier. They're finding that Zone 2 training is really good for just overall general health. So it's a new, kind of a new exploration for me in my training. So I'm really curious to see how this affects my racing coming up. I'm still in the beginning of my ride, and my heart rate is between 125 and 130. So my Zone 2 heart rate is 110 to 133. And like I mentioned earlier, the heart rate's lower earlier in the ride. So what I do is I use power in the first half of the ride, and then I'll typically switch over to using heart rate, because once my heart rate starts to get above my Zone 2, I switch back over to heart rate, because that means I'm losing blood volume because of dehydration. The highs are supposed to be around 82 to 85 on the ride, and that is about 78, 79 degrees Celsius. So dehydration won't be much of a factor today, but it will be some. But even as you get more fatigued throughout a ride, your body's going to be working harder, which is why it's good to switch over to heart rate, because you don't want to try to maintain the same power. And I'm in like mid to upper Zone 2 power right now, but if I keep this up and I'm in upper Zone 2, by the end of the ride, my heart rate, if I try to stay there, most likely will be above my zone 2, so I switch to heart rate. So bottom line, make sure my power doesn't go below my floor of zone 2 and my heart rate doesn't go over the ceiling of zone 2, if that makes sense. I'm an hour and a half into the ride and I still feel really good. I'm in about mid zone 2 for power, creeping up to near the top of zone 2 for heart rate. So I know I'm gonna have to back off my power in maybe another half hour. One thing I'm doing for this ride is I'm not taking breaks from zone 2. I'm gonna try to keep it in zone 2 the whole ride. I'm not gonna do like, you know, 30 minutes to an hour, rest for a while and pick it back up. I'm gonna try to do it for the whole ride. We'll see how it goes. Got my podcast going. One thing that I've noticed is these bone conducting headphones are really good for zone 2 because you can't go that fast with these. You just can't hear. About 18 to 20 miles an hour. Totally good for the bone conducting headphones. Just a little side note there. Here's an example of how slow you have to go up a steep hill. This is about a 12% grade. I'm going 4 miles an hour so I don't cross over my zone 2 threshold. This is a hill normally I would just get out of the saddle and power up. 3.5 hours in, still feeling pretty good. Definitely having to stay in the lower end of my power zone to keep my heart rate from going above, which is what I expected. Just past the local corn maze back there. Truck came in with goats. I love living in rural areas. Such good gravel roads to ride. So a few observations about riding in zone 2 is, one, just like the gravel road climbs are hard to keep it in zone 2 from the top end, the steep gravel descents, you just have to coast. I mean, you can't pedal hard enough to keep it in zone 2 usually because it's just too bumpy. Also, you have to plan for your rides to be longer. That's kind of obvious, but this ride is going to take close to 4 hours, if not more, whereas normally I'd finish it in like 3.5, 3:40. So you have to mentally and then just time-wise plan for your rides to be longer or just plan a shorter route. And then finally, this is something I've never heard before, but your butt gets more sore. It's kind of like there's less pressure on the pedals, and so there's more pressure on your butt. I've never heard anybody say that. It's true. So zone 2 will whip your butt into shape in a different way. Back in the neighborhood, 4 hours and 6 minutes. It'll be about 4:08 by the time I get to the house. 62.5 miles. Riding in zone 2 just takes more patience. I realized that I used to have this attitude that if I wasn't doing intervals, I was riding an appropriate zone 2 ride. After finding out what my zone is, my power, heart rate, all that, I realized that's not the case. It also takes more water for the same loop that you normally do. I ran out of water like 45 minutes ago. I am so thirsty. So I am ready to get home and drink water. All right, so those are my observations of riding in zone 2 for my longest ride yet, keeping it in zone 2 the entire ride. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for this long video. Thanks for watching.